Eva Putzova was actually one of our very original guests on the Vanguard podcast. I think it may have been episode 4, actually. One of the first conversations we had with a congressional candidate. We were extremely impressed and inspired by her run for Congress and her platform. She was repping, real leftist values, ending the wars, Indigenous rights. So her platform was fantastic. And she came really close to winning, actually, against Blue Dog incumbent Tom O'Halloran.
Got 41% of the vote.
Yeah, 41% of the vote. And before we introduce her, I want to throw up this tweet on screen just to give a little bit of context, because if you guys haven't been following the story, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez donated money, donation money, honestly, to right-wing Democrats, including Tom O'Halloran, again, a Blue Dog Democrat that does not support Medicare for all. And that's something that Eva Putzova actually pointed out here to this tweet here, which says basically people criticizing the AOC, they're basically saying she's okay with losing the House majority. And Eva Putzova responded and said, hey, we got 41.4% of the vote in 2020 against the Blue Dog incumbent, again, Tom O'Halloran, who just received one of those donations from AOC. And Eva did the second best after Jessica Cisneros from among the challengers that didn't make it.
As a first-time candidate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and unlike Cisneros, Eva Putzova was not endorsed by Ocasio-Cortez. And as it says here in this response, Eva says it is likely she's running again. So now AOC is essentially just donated to the primary opponent of a real progressive candidate.
Yeah. So without further ado, we're really excited to be joined by Eva Putzova. Here we go.
How's it going?
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it's been it's been about a year since we last spoke with you. I actually just watched our interview that we did with you the last time and just winced my way through it. We were just getting started with the podcast, so hopefully this is a little bit smoother for you. But we appreciate you being so gracious with us as we were just getting started.
Oh, I love being on your podcast, and I'm loving being back again, and hopefully I'll be smoother than I was before too.
You mentioned in that tweet that you were planning on potentially running again, and I was just wondering, did Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez contact you and ask you if you're going to run again before she donated to Tom O'Halloran, the Blue Dog Democrat that you're trying to primary and take out?
Mm-hmm. No, not at all. And I wouldn't necessarily expect that she would contact me, but I very open.
I would also like to remind people, just for public record, Tom O'Halloran is a former police officer from Chicago. That's another little bit of interesting tidbit of his campaign. So she's also donated to the campaign of a former police officer.
Yeah, and it's it's very odd for Representative Ocasio-Cortez to be doing that, but it's odd on so many levels. It's not just one thing is why are you so early in a cycle when you know that so many candidates or so many potential candidates are waiting for any signs on redistricting, because we don't know whether these districts are going to look like they looked in the previous cycle. So we're waiting for redistricting, so that there will be more candidates joining the races, so you don't know what the political landscape looks like. And then, then there's more fundamental questions. Like if Representative Ocasio-Cortez wanted to contribute to our campaign, we wouldn't take the money, because we don't take money from PACs, from any PAC, because that is not transparent. It's really bundling other supporters' money and passing it on another campaign, which on its own is just wrong, right? Yeah. And so that's what's wrong with it. And then, if you want to support individual, and I think even, whether you're wherever you are on political spectrum, you want to support Blue Dogs, then support them with your own money. Don't take your supporters' money. And if you're going to do, then you better disclose that upfront when you're collecting those donations.
Yeah.
I'm sure plenty of AOC's supporters would say, hey, I'm fine, you can do with your money whatever you want. But to assume that, I don't think that's okay. And again, like it's the whole thing. What's wrong with money in politics, right? Like, this is a PAC. This is not AOC's money. This is a political action committee set up to support Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez congressional run. And so I think that there's like fundamental problems, in my opinion, with these, with these contributions. And to be fair, we all saw the Politico's article that they reported on this. We have not seen the financial reports from FEC yet. They have not been filed. And I just don't want to, it was reported that, there are these 32, conservative Democrats in reportedly swing districts, and that's who she supported. But I just haven't seen those reports. So there is a chance that AOC has not contributed to my former opponent, Tom O'Halloran. But
I'd wager that the reporter at Politico has seen those reports.
Yes, probably, yeah. I mean, I trust that that's, what happened. And but,
just a follow up to that, Eva, I'm sure this is a question that's on the mind of a lot of our listeners, which is why I want to make sure that we ask it. A lot of people have voiced, people who have contributed to AOC and feel like they have been, in a sense, betrayed, or the funds have not gone, to the kind of priorities that they felt like they were, putting their hard-earned money towards. A lot of these people are working class, don't have a lot of funds. So when they put something towards it, they're really like, it's like on a whim and a prayer, basically, that this is going to actually change their lives. And I'm wondering if, this kind of through and through, compromising as it comes to campaign finances, whether it's the Republican Party or Democrats, including members of the squad like AOC, who have, constantly told people that they're going to hold themselves to a higher level of accountability. Does it make you have second thoughts about running as a Democrat if you were to ever run for Congress again? Or do you think that it's a necessity?
So, I'm certainly considering running for Congress again. I feel it's an unfinished business. I feel that we had 41.4% of the vote, which is great on the first try. I do see how incredibly difficult it is to go against everybody and everything that, is kind of, we can put together under the umbrella of corporate entrenched establishment and, under the Democratic Party. So it's very difficult. I can tell you that, before I launched my first campaign for Congress, just before I tried to reach the chair of the state Democratic Party, who never returned my call. I ran into her 10 months later, and she said me, I owe you a call back. And I said, well, no, you don't really need to. That's 10 months later. But then, when my campaign was over, you would think that the decent thing to do as a state Democratic Party chair is to call all the candidates who participated in the process, who actually brought into the process voters who otherwise perhaps would not join, as voters, and just say, hey, thank you for running. I'm glad, you put so much work in it, and we did very well. So, but no, I have not received any call. I'm now trying to reach the current party chair and just chat with her about me possibly running again, and just kind of, because there is a new chair, and so far I'm being ignored. And it's very so it's to respond, this is a very long way to say it's very discouraging. And I think what also AOC is contributing to, and maybe this is something that they're not thinking about. They're thinking about, we need to protect the seats, as if protecting the seats from what? From whom? From voters? I mean, the voters ultimately in those districts will decide, right? But I think what this is doing is actually pushing progressives to consider to run outside of the parties, because the calculation of every candidate is, what are my chances and what is the path to victory, right? So if I got 41.4%, I think it's possible to maybe win in a primary, but I also think that the pushback from the party is going to be great, and maybe I will just come to 48%, the next time, or 46%. And is it worth it? Or should I run as an independent and skip the entire primary and go straight to the general, right? Yeah. Which will guarantee that the current Congress, the incumbent, will lose. I may not win, but he will for sure lose, because for sure I will peel off some of those votes from him. And if the margin is fairly narrow, then so it's kind of a dangerous, actually, strategic move.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Well, what's so frustrating about this to me is that, like you say here in your tweet, you received 41.4% of the vote against the Blue Dog incumbent, who's just received AOC's cash. That's the second best that anyone did after Jessica Cisneros among those who didn't make it. So you say that you wouldn't expect AOC to give you a call before donating to Tom O'Halloran, but why? Like, I would expect her to give you a call. The whole project that got her elected, the whole Justice Democrats kind of theory of change, was that they would take out Democrats like Tom O'Halloran and replace them with Democrats like Eva Putzova. So if she's not coming to your aid, and in fact, not only is she leaving you out to dry by not endorsing you, but she's literally donating to the corporate right-wing Democrat who you're trying to unseat, much like she did Joe Crowley, then at that point, she's just, completely doing something that is contra to the original mission that she laid out, the original theory that she spelled out for us. So at this point, she, I don't see how that's in any way productive to the movement.
And again, because I haven't had the conversation with her or anybody close to her, so I don't understand the reasoning and the whole strategy. All I see a bunch of holes in that strategy, and actually a pathway to lose more seats for Democrats. But I think the whole conversation about, keeping blue seats, and the whole conversation, I think, has to change, because what we're saying is that it's more important that we maintain power for the party as opposed to move the policies towards more progressive policies, no matter who are the holders. Maybe they're independents, maybe they're people from other parties, and maybe on some issues there's Republicans who are kind of buying into or want to push policy, the same particular policy, probably not all policy.
Yeah, like war or something, like Rand Paul or something.
So the conversation becomes so partisan, as if we're not talking. These seats don't belong to the parties; they belong to the people. And that is what bothers me about, and kind of like, what are we keeping the seats for? What's the end game? Don't you want to move the?
Well, I think the end game might be to stay in Congress for as long as possible and become the Speaker of the House.
Yeah. And that's actually my last question for you, Eva Putzova, is that some people watching this might, love what they've heard from you. But, a lot of people also feel like we've gone through this experiment a few times and we've elected progressives to Congress that have a similar platform, and they feel betrayed and let down. And they feel like once they get in there, they're more loyal to their colleagues and their elitist, friends in DC than they are to the people that got them elected. So I was just wondering if you could, offer any sort of a strategical contrast that you would try to uphold were you to get elected to what we've seen demonstrated from folks like AOC and the lack of resistance that they've offered.
Right. And, this is very difficult and I completely understand when people say, well, I'm never going to donate to any Democrat, because I've heard that, and I completely understand that sentiment. At the same time, if I run and decide to run as a Democrat, well, I still want people's support. And I don't know what, one can say to make people comfortable that, if elected, I'm not going to turn into just another piece of the machine that, AOC very early on said she's not going to contribute to the CCC with her dues. And I think that's great. And she hasn't contributed, but then she kind of bypasses that idea and just contributes to her colleagues, which is kind of, the same. And so, I think it's wrong to contribute, to pass money from campaign to campaign, like have your supporters support you, or contribute your own money. Like, why is AOC or any of these Congress, because she's not the only one. Here's the thing, this was a big story because actually the point was that some of these Democrats don't want her money, right? The story should be really, why do we think this is actually normal? Like, contribute your own money. You want to support your colleague, go ahead and do that as an individual, not as a campaign. And so we didn't take any PAC money of any kind, not liberal PACs, not progressive PACs, not PACs from organizations. And actually, I had that conversation with the organization that wanted to contribute, progressive organization, PAC money, and I said, no, I don't want it. Like, you endorsed me, but I don't want your money, because you have to isolate yourself from those interests. And I think if you can say, and it's not just we don't take the money from PACs, we don't give to other PACs, and that's another piece that you can kind of say and pledge. And then you don't give to DCCC, because that's just an institution to keep who's in, to be in, to stay in, even though they're not serving the population well. And so I have no way to persuade other people to trust me over, because I'm just yet another, person who's trying to get elected, possibly. But I do come from a background where I understand how, totalitarian regimes function. I understand how corruption works. And, whether you have a one-party system or two-party system, and you have a kind of these corrupted forces, you can just kind of trust some people based on what you hear from them, and they still can disappoint you. I'm not saying that. I hope that I wouldn't. It's very hard to say, like, I will never do or say something.
Right, of course.
But yeah, I appreciate the honesty that you're approaching this with. I think that's very telling. And I did have one, adjacent question, something that I wanted to follow up with you a little bit, because we talked about it in our first conversation. One of the things that you had put as one of the forefronts in your campaign that was really inspiring to me and Gavin, and something that we were excited by that we didn't see, and a ton of other even progressive candidates, was your, first people's first policy, and your, commitment to the Navajo Nation, which would be a part of your district if ever elected for Arizona's first district. And I'm wondering, and we obviously talked about the way that the Navajo community had been devastated by the COVID pandemic, and how the resources had not been provided for them to have PPE and socially distance and sustain themselves economically. The federal allocations were just completely unacceptable. I wanted to ask how vaccine rollout is going on reservations, and if that's something that you have any insight into. One of the things that Gavin and I are concerned with on the podcast is international vaccine discrepancy and the disparity with the elderly people in places like Central and South America, or places like the West Bank are able to get access to these vaccines, as opposed to the fact that the Hy-Vee down the street from where I live keeps tweeting out that, oh, people better come at 5 o'clock today because the vaccines are going to expire if they don't get injected. So there's a huge disparity in access. And I just wondered if, one, you could speak to that broadly, but also as it relates to the First People's reservations in your district.
Yeah, so I think the access to vaccination, is always more difficult for people in the rural areas, and certainly on the reservation, just because of the infrastructure that is not developed. The distances are huge. Many roads are not paved. There is a lack of communication or way for people to actually learn where they can be vaccinated. My understanding is that there has been, and I cannot say whether this is comparable to the vaccination rates of the white population, but my understanding is that there's been fairly well distributed these vaccines on the Navajo Nation. I don't have that, I don't take me for my word, but my sense is that there are, because from my environment I connect and I have a lot of friends who are natives,
Sure.
and so they kind of report, and I see them, they're going to their community health centers where they're getting vaccinated, and so that is, it's more, I think, matter of like, how do you learn where you can go, and like, it's just but I think they're fairly connected to each other, and I think that's been going fairly well, that vaccination. I think there are big problems that the Native people face, and this is another reason why I'm considering to run again, because my opponent, he will be in the office, this year is his 5th year. And, when people think about 5 years ago, in what way were their lives worse, and now they are better because as a result of some transformative policies. And I would say that there hasn't been improvement in people's lives. I mean, we see that they were given tainted vaccines, right? That during this whole process, totally the support and assistance, there were nonprofits have been created, and people were doing mutual aid to help these rural communities to just bring basic food. I've heard about, during this whole pandemic, that people actually came to their stores from outside of the Native communities and bought out products that were in shortage in white communities, which is also like a whole level of cruelness, I guess, or cruelty. That's not even war.
Yeah, odious for sure. I mean, that's the kind of shit that nobody's even surprised by, right? Like, of course, that's going to happen under a capitalist society where you make that legal.
Yeah, and we kind of like, I feel like, we are becoming so numb to all these struggles. And because the people in power and people who support people in power, the elite, professional class, who funds campaigns, we don't see the people who live in poverty and struggle. They're out of sight, and we just kind of think, oh, that's okay. The same thing as we don't see these other countries that are, they have 0% of population vaccinated. Nobody here is thinking about like, how come, we have access to these vaccines and other countries don't? And why don't we prioritize those parts of the world that we've been exploiting for so long? And we can do that very easily just by getting rid of these patents that keep access to manufacturing of the vaccines, or for other manufacturers around the world. Like, I just feel like we have responsibility as one of the wealthiest country to help the entire world to get vaccinated. Because frankly, this is not going to end, this pandemic, for all of us, if we don't vaccinate the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think it's so correct that the numbing is absolutely real as far as people just not paying attention. And it needs to be said that a big part of the reason why is that capitalist infrastructure that our media is built on. It's not just that people don't care or that they don't want to hear about depressing news. It's partially that it's not profitable for media to report on it, for CNN to, tell that story. People are going to change the channel or whatever. So they're not going to, spend their time programming that material.
And not only that, it's not going to be easy to sell advertisements to.
Exactly.
People, they're not going to be in the mood for that after they've reflected deeply on something that's critical of capitalism, critical of exploitation. You don't want to look at your Nikes and be like, oh, this was made in Vietnam thanks to borderline slave labor. Yeah. But I guess all of these things that we're talking about are a great case for why we need a congressperson, Putzova. So I think I speak for both of us here at the Vanguard when we sincerely hope that you do decide to get back in the race. Obviously we understand if you decide not to, but we're pulling for you if you do.
Yeah, and we'll be here to support you and interview you if and when you do announce or decide to run. We'd love to, give you a announcement interview and make sure that everyone is aware of your platform and ideas, because it'd be fantastic if you were able to get in this time. Sometimes it takes candidates one or two or three even times to run and get in there. We saw that with Cori Bush, who's in St. Louis in our state of Missouri. So, I think that obviously, like Zach said, you have our endorsements, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so very much for having me, and for everybody who's listening and watching. I just want to introduce you very quickly to an organization that I actually started with a bunch of former congressional candidates, and it's called Catch Fire. And if you go to catchfiremovement.org, you'll find the organization. But it's essentially an organization we're dedicated to support progressive leaders very early on and all the way through their campaigns or through their candidacies or whatever leadership role they're in, and even after that. Because I think we have in the progressive circles, we have this big problem that we don't have that ecosystem and that network of progressive organizations who can be supportive of progressive leaders, and not just people running for offices, but also people who want to run citizen initiatives, start their own organizations. And I think that it's very needed to create that kind of institutional support system, because certainly the establishment and the corporate establishment, and with the various ideologies, they have their system. And progressives, we don't have. There is an organization. Either it's just like endorsements and essentially that's it. But there is no support of working progressive people. Like to run for office, you actually, as a working person, you have to figure out how you're going to make a living during the time.
And I will just say that some of these endorsements, we've interviewed a couple of these candidates here on the Vanguard, Shervin Azami up in California and Jason Call, and we'd love to have Alexandra Hunt on the program as well. So these are great candidates. These are not establishment capitulators. These are really bold, progressive, socialist-minded candidates that really do deserve support. So this is a great mission, and this is real work.
Yeah, so support us, support Catch Fire. Because that's another way to support candidates in a way that is meaningful. So thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. We look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Awesome.